Hello, everybody. My name is Rueyling. I'm the Dean of College Arts and Letters. It is my great honor to welcome you to our College Arts and Letters, our Research Spotlight series. This is our very first installment of our Research Spotlight series, featuring our newly tenured and or promoted professors in our college. Last year, we had 7 faculties who went up for tenure and promotion. And we're very happy. Today we have 5 of them to showcase one of their research or creative projects. They're very impactful to their own professional development and also something they're most proud of. And I am immensely proud of my faculty and their accomplishment. And I would like to thank David, Brady, and Dany de la Cruz to help us preparing for today's panel presentation and advertise our events. I would also like to thank our associate dean Parstu, Faisa Rinkalam, help us sort of conceptualizing the Research Spotlight series. And I also like to thank our department chairs for reading all those RPT files very carefully and writing those files, and also our college evaluation committee members. They're also spending a lot of time reading and writing each faculty who go for performance review very carefully. It really takes them a lot of time to do that. And in particular, I would like to thank Professor Johanna Smith for graciously agreeing to serve as our facilitator for today's panel presentation. And so she will introduce each speaker and a brief summary of their talk today. So without further ado, now I yield the floor to Professor Smith.
Excellent. Hi, greetings everyone. I'm very happy to be here.
Paperweight.
Oh,
because I came unprepared for.
Could everybody mute if you are not speaking? That would be great. I think just for the purposes of being organized, we'll have each speaker come up one at a time. They have about 12 minutes. And if we can have everybody else hide your video and mute while they speak, if that's okay, I think that would be polite. But I was going to throw this out as a possibility only because I've read the tenure files of all of these people, and to say that they're rock stars is an understatement. Okay, so these people are phenomenal, and you're going to have a ton of questions. Like, these are some of the strongest files, all 7 of the people who went up. I was just sitting here going, oh, they're amazing. Wait, they're more amazing. Wait, oh my God, they're amazing. And so it made me so happy to be associated with such strong faculty. And it made me proud to be a Coyote. It made me proud to be here with such incredible colleagues. So I personally have tons of questions. So if it's okay with everyone, if you have comments or questions, go ahead and type them in the chat. And I will try to kind of keep track of that. And if we have time at the end, I think we're doing all the questions at the end, Rueyling, or did you want to do a few questions after each one? Probably all at the end.
I know Maria has to teach at 1 o'clock. So
maybe we'll do a few minutes for Maria, and then we'll do.
Yes, it's okay with the panelists, because we will also want to have people have time to ask Maria a question, and unfortunately Maria had to teach. And thank you, Maria, for presenting today. It's funny you had to teach at 1 o'clock. Mm-hmm.
Okay, excellent. So so let's segue into Maria then. So we'll have some time to learn about her work. Here's her intro. Maria Garcia Puente is an associate professor in the Department of World Languages and Literatures. She earned a BA in English Philology, an MA in Applied Foreign Languages from the University of Santiago de Compostela, Spain, and an MA and PhD in Hispanic Literature from the University of Kansas. Her main research areas are contemporary Spanish literature and film, with a focus on small cinemas and gender studies. So if I can invite everyone to hide your video, please.
I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So thank you all for joining us today for this panel. I'm excited to share with you some of the projects that have resulted from the ongoing collaboration that I have nurtured with Educatizen, the educational foundation of the Thyssen-Bornemisza National Museum in Spain over the last years. If you visit Madrid, the Thyssen-Bornemisza National Museum is a must-see. Once the second largest private art collection in the world, the Thyssen houses more than 1,000 paintings by prestigious artists like Monet, Kandinsky, Dali, Picasso, Canaletto. Okay. Can you hear me? I don't know. I started like 2 minutes ago. Is that okay?
No, you are loud and clear.
Okay, so
Yes, we can hear you.
Once the second largest private art collection in the world, the Thyssen houses more than 1,000 paintings by prestigious artists like Monet, Kandinsky, Dali, Canaletto, etc., and it attracts more than 1 million visitors a year. Ours was the first collaboration of this cultural institution with a university in the US. But how did it originate, and what has it consisted of? Back in 2015, in my second year as a faculty member at CSUSB, I was awarded a grant from the TRC to redesign Spanish 302, Theory and Practice in Composition, which is a mandatory course for all students in the Spanish major and minor. My plan was to redesign this course by integrating a high-impact practice, project-based learning, and adopting an interdisciplinary approach, writing through art. Also, since most of the students in our program have never studied abroad, nor have they had any close professional contact with a Hispanic cultural institution outside of the US, I wanted to add an international component to the course. And here is where Educatissen's contributions became instrumental. After learning about one of Educatissen's public educational programs, El Thyssen en Español, in December of 2015, I wrote to Ana Moreno, former director of Educatissen, and Dr. Ángeles Cutillas, one of the educators at the foundation, about the possibility of working together in the design and implementation of the final project of the course. During the design phase, which extended over a year and a half, Dr. Cutillas and I worked physically at the museum and remotely. She played a key role in the selection of the paintings that were featured in the final project of the course and in the production of a collection of educational videos designed to enhance our students' learning experience. For the final project, students in this course worked collaboratively under the guidance of Dr. Cutillas and myself to produce our professional product for the Thyssen, a virtual tour to the museum through their creative pieces of writing. This virtual tour was later curated and is currently featured on Educatissen's webpage. The impact of this pedagogical innovation was twofold. Firstly, it motivated students by providing them with a real window into art and Hispanic culture. And secondly, it stimulated their creativity and enabled them to develop their skills for sophisticated analysis. For the creation of our tour, we used an educational platform called StoryMap by NightLab. StoryMap is a free online platform developed by Northwestern University that allows students to tell stories online in an engaging and inspiring way. This platform turned out to be a perfect fit for the project because it is very interactive and it offers users the ability to zoom in on the paintings featured. Our creative recent tour to the Thyssen had 10 stops. In each one of them, students explored creatively a painting of the museum through a wide variety of writing assignments that provided them extensive practice in 3 major text types: description, narration, and argumentation. As you will see at each stop of the tour, we have the same layout. To the left, there's a high resolution image of the selected painting, and to the right, on the top half, we can find Educatissen's commentary of the painting studied. Then, right below the video, there is a description of the writing activities students had to complete, and finally, a selection of their work. I will show you some of the activities we designed to give you a better idea of the overall project and how it was implemented in the classroom setting. In the first project I will discuss, titled Yo, Gabriel Münter, I, Gabriel Münter, students practiced self-description through the self-portrait of Gabriel Münter. In the introductory video by Dr. Cutillas, they learned some key information about the life and work of this artist, who was the romantic partner of Wassily Kandinsky and one of the founders of the German expressionist group known as the Blue Rider. In this activity, students had to put themselves in the skin of this female artist in order to write her self-description. This assignment allowed us to establish interesting connections with the Hispanic cultural scene. In class, we compared Munter's autobiographical work with the one produced by Mexican artist Frida Kahlo. Students also had a chance to refine their narrative skills along the tour. For example, in this assignment, they had to exploit the narrative potential of images by writing a short story inspired by the famous painting Hotel Room by Edward Hopper. In her video, Dr. Cutillas shared with us the official story behind the painting, that it was Hopper's actual wife, Josephine Neeson, who modeled for the painting. And she also showed us some of the numerous books that have this image as a cover. The last stop of the tour I will comment on allowed us to examine the dynamic emergence of the avant-garde movements, in particular Italian futurism, on the artistic scene, while practicing an argumentative text type, the opinion piece. In her video, Dr. Cutillas showed us the painting Patriotic Demonstration by Giacomo Balla and explained to us some of the controversial propositions of futurism. For example, the following one, which states, and I quote, "We will destroy museums, libraries, academies of every kind. We will fight moralism, feminism, and every opportunistic and utilitarian cowardice." The premises of this artistic movement were listed in Marinetto's manifesto, which was published in the French newspaper Le Figaro in 1909. In this assignment, students had to reflect on one of the propositions of the movement by writing an opinion letter about it to the editor of Le Figaro. In order to promote direct interaction between educatizen, the educatizen team in Madrid on the one hand and our students in California on the other, we decided to document our collaboration on Facebook. On a regular basis, educatizen posted news about some of our projects on the Facebook page, and students commented on them as they posed questions to the educators on the other side of the Atlantic. This is one example. All the students in the course visited a local museum of their choosing and bought a postcard there. The last day of class, we devoted some time to writing our postcards before mailing them to the educators at the Thyssen Museum. Educatizen shared this post on Facebook thanking our students for the surprise they had received, and this post reached more than 2,400 people. The redesigned course, Spanish 302, Intermediate Spanish Composition Through Art, was taught for the first time in winter 2017, and it was very well received and evaluated by the 30 students enrolled in it. Since then, the course has been taught 4 more times, and it will continue to be included regularly in our program's course offerings. Over the course of the years, we had a chance to enrich our students' learning experience in Spanish 302 even more by connecting live with the museum on several occasions, despite the 9-hour difference between Madrid and the 9-hour time difference between Madrid and California. And also by taking part in fall 2017 in the first ever temporal exhibition at the Thyssen Museum curated by Educatizen. For the purpose of this exhibition, Lección de Arte, we asked a group of volunteers in our course to complete an activity inspired by Mateo Mate's installation Sin Fronteras, Área Restringida. The activity, recorded on video and played next to the installation at the exhibition, consisted of 2 parts. In the first part, students had to select one or several items from a list of words: power, politics, vigilance, security, border, nation, limit, etc., and reflect on them from the personal point of view. Then, students had to rethink or re-examine the meaning of those words in the context of our collaborative experience with the museum. Dr. Cutillas and I presented the results of our work in this course at 2 conferences: the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages 2017 Annual Conference and the 29th International Conference of the Association of Gender and Sexuality Studies, and also at several professional development workshops for educators organized by Educatizen in partnership with the Regional Council of Education of Madrid. Also, after securing funds from the College of Arts and Letters and the Department of World Languages and Literatures in the summer of 2020, the Thyssen-Bornemisza National Museum published Artefactos para Escribir. This monograph, which I co-authored with Dr. Cutillas, includes, among other pedagogical materials, a detailed description of our collaborative project and a selection of our students' work. And the journey continues in 2018, thanks to the support of a grant from the Office of Student Research. Dr. Cutillas and I developed a second course taught in collaboration with the museum. Spanish 402, Advanced Spanish Composition Through Art, and we have recently finished writing the second monograph of Educatissen's Arte plus L pedagogy series. What I have presented to you today is the result of teamwork, and it wouldn't have been possible without the generosity of the Thyssen-Bornemisza National Museum, the guidance and help of the instructional designers of ATI, and the support of the TRC, the Office of Student Research, the College of Arts and Letters, and my department, the Department of World Languages and Literatures. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. If everyone could please, if it's okay, if we can turn the video back on so that Maria can see you when you ask a question, I think that might be very useful. So Maria, if you could stop sharing and everyone else can come join you, that would be fantastic. Yay, I know, first let's, excellent timing as well. I have a lot of questions personally, but does anybody, would anyone like to start off with a question? Or if you want to type it, we could do that too. Dorota?
Yeah, thank you. And it's such a privilege to be here. This is so beautiful what you've presented. I'm thrilled and touched about and so thrilled the way to introduce the language, the culture through this absolutely beautiful art. And question, and you alluded on that, but you know, there's so much of absolutely fantastic Spanish art. How do you go about selecting, you know, and narrowing that down to the level that it's, you know, manageable in the class? How you did those? So what yeah, criteria? How you even start?
Well, most of the pieces that we selected from the Thyssen Museum actually are European art, not really Hispanic art. So the biggest challenge for us was actually to establish connections, how to make connections between the art that Angeles, you know, was presenting. She's the expert. I'm not really the expert. And on my part, selecting, you know, pieces and artists from our culture that could be put in dialogue with the ones that, you know, they learned about in the Thyssen Museum. But I think the most important thing for us was to help the students establish first an emotional, you know, connection with the painting, you know, before, you know, going in depth in analysis. But of course we had I remember we had one whole session in which we analyzed one painting. You know, it was like an hour and a half analyzing one painting. First, we did what we could, and then I told them the story that Angeles told me about that painting, that is actually the portrait of Giovanna Tornabuoni by Ghirlandaio, by Domenico Ghirlandaio. That is like the symbol of the Thyssen-Bornemisza Museum. So after we did our best to, you know, create a narrative that we thought the painting was telling us, I gave them the information that Angeles, you know, had provided me with when I visited the museum for the first time. She actually gave me a tour to the museum, and that was the first painting I saw. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I have asked your question. It was kind of a complicated one.
Thank you. That's yeah, it clearly is a lot of work and a lot of thought. And like you said, making connection between Hispanic and Spanish art. I think that just, I got it. Thank you.
Does anyone else have a question for Maria?
Oh,
I have one. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I have a question and comment. Well, first, this was fantastic. It's been great for me because as the new department chair, I don't really know the faculty that well. So actually, I didn't know about any of this. It's fantastic on so many levels, mainly the pedagogy and the way you make composition fun and having the different activities from narration to exposition integrated with visual arts, and this fantastic partnership with the cultural institution in Spain and use of technology. So it was great to hear about it. And I'm sorry that I couldn't help with it since I wasn't chair at the time. But can you also talk about your sabbatical project? I hope you have a great and safe trip to Spain. And I know you were planning to go to Madrid and study film archives. Can you briefly talk about your next project?
Well, my field of expertise is cinema, and I'm going to focus on a Galician film called A Cicatriz Blanca, directed by Margarita Ledo, and how the experience of the Galician immigration to Argentina is portrayed in that film, because the Galician immigrants to Argentina had to face a lot of stigma, and so I just wanted to explore how this experience is told or rewritten in a way from the other side, from our side, our perspective.
I have, yeah, personally, this has been fantastic. I have to stop just because of time, but Maria, we need to talk later because there's so many interdisciplinary crossovers I want to talk to you about. Me being a theater educator, I use visual art all the time, and now I want to talk to the visual art department. I want to have a big discussion with everyone about this interdisciplinary approach to using art to inspire our kids, because it's obviously working. It's obviously working. So I applaud the success of your class. Thank you for sharing so much. Thank you. Unfortunately, we have to move on. But like I said, this is going to happen with all of our speakers. So our next speaker is Ed Gomez. So after this introduction, if everyone could please hide your video and mute so that Ed can present. And again, feel free to have comments in the chat if you so desire. Ed Gomez received his BFA from Arizona State University in 1999 and his MFA from the Otis College of Art and Design in 2003. Mr. Gomez's interdisciplinary art practice revolves around the questioning of exhibition practices, institutional framework, and historical models of artistic production. He has exhibited both nationally and internationally, and his practice includes abstract and representational painting, printmaking, graphic design, video, and three-dimensional work, as well as conceptual models of art making. And I'm going to make myself go away.
Okay. Well, thanks for the opportunity to come and share some of the more creative projects that I've been a part of since joining CSUSB in 2016. So just to give you a brief background on what I do, I'm an artist, but I also curate. And in 2006, I started a nonprofit arts organization that basically deals with Mexico and California and involving artists from that region. And we, in 2018, we had the opportunity to do a big project at RAFMA, and we wanted to figure out some way to involve students into this art exhibition with 30 artists from Mexico and California. So we utilized the Dutton Gallery, which is a student-based gallery, and we're conceptualizing ways in which we can activate it. And one of the solutions was to create an artist in residency program where we could invite artists to come in, work with the students, and then the final product would be a professional exhibition held in the Dutton Family Gallery. So our very first artist in residency partner was Melly Barrigeddon, and the project started in June of 2018, and it was supported by the OSR, the Summer Research Program. So the students were able to work with Melly and then also get paid for it, and in the end, they could mount their own professional exhibition. So Melly Barrigeddon is a Tijuana-based artist. She's an international artist. She uses elements and images from mass media, pop culture, popular culture to address gender issues, particularly imposed feminine archetypes in our patriarchal society. So she's a mixed media artist. She involves a lot of design and graphic elements into her work. We thought she would be a great artist to invite and work with our students. So some of the objectives that we had. So we wanted the artists to come and do workshops with our students, do artist presentations, do professional practices, do studio visits with our students, and then create a project-based collaborative exhibition as a final product. So what do the students get out of it? Well, the students get out of working, they get the opportunity to meet an international professional artist. Students promoted and they mounted their own professional exhibition as a conclusion of this artist in residency project. And then they also have the opportunity to do talks and then create their own professional exhibition and reception. So Melly came to us with this idea of creating a kinetic sculpture / painting. This was one of her conceptual mock-ups on what she wanted to do. And so we had to figure out ways as a team to kind of learn the software, figure out the best machine to use to make her ideas become physical. So the students learn digital fabrication techniques. They learned how to use Adobe Illustrator. And then using our digital fabrication lab, they use laser cutters to make her project a reality. And here's one of the pictures of them working together in our digital fabrication lab, calibrating the machines, and then actually getting her designs and then cutting them out in different materials. And then at the same time they were working, they were also developing their own works of art. So they mount their professional exhibition. So as the project progressed, we found ways to overcome some of the challenges that we had by figuring out ways to make something flat into something that's dimensional. And then there was a kinetic component to it where the piece had to actually move. So Berrigan says, as in life, cycles reign supreme. However, sometimes a radical free agent changes the direction, prompting the others' contemplation of their automated existence and eventual evolution. So this piece, Cyclical Warriors, is a kinetic piece that moves. Let's see if I can get this to work. So we had to, come up with ideas to problem solve, create motors, and then, make everything work the artist wanted it. Got to attend the conference and then explain the process and share with the rest of the members of the OSR, and shared some of their projects that they did over the summer. And then again, mounting their own professional exhibitions. So this is a scene from the Dutton Family Gallery where students were able to go in there and then mount and exhibit the works that they had worked on over the summer, and then creating their own exhibition. So part of this also involved the students doing artist talks. So we gave the students the opportunity to come in, talk about their work, share their work with the other students, and then have their final exhibition. The second partnership was with the Riverside Art Museum and the new Cheech Marine Center for Chicano Art and Industry. So for this project, we teamed up with the Riverside Art Museum, and then we had Armando Lerma, which is a Coachella-based artist, come in and work with the students. Armando is an internationally renowned artist and worked throughout the Southwest. Currently is living and working in Indio, Coachella area. It was also part of the Desert X exhibition, which is a prestigious binational exhibition that happens in the desert. And then Armand's and making art out of it. He also has this ongoing mural project where he's coordinated and facilitated, I think, over 20 murals in downtown Coachella. It's an amazing project. So Armando came and worked with our students, did an artist talk, presentation, spent time working with the students one-on-one. And so for the final project, we decided to create a sign-based exhibition. So we created the Visual Frequency Show, which is a multimedia group exhibition that examines the multiple uses and expressions inherent in sign-based forms of communication because of Armando's practice being very sign-based. So the artworks in Visual Frequency were a combination of the 19 Artists in Residency program, a partnership with the CSUSB Department of Art and Design, the Riverside Art Museum, and its inaugural program began in the fall of 2019 with Coachella-based artist Armando Lerma, whose work was shown along with students' work. And the program was made possible by a grant from the California Fund, the James Foundation, along with support from the College of Arts and Letters and the Department of Art and Design. So this is an example of some of the works that the students were producing. Again, this was all made in consultation and collaboration with one another. And we had graduate students also participating in this. It was a great opportunity for the grad students to also work with others. And then we had a public exhibition where they all came together and got a chance to show everything. And part of this We have additional artists that we'd like to invite. So this is like an ongoing project, but we're super excited about giving our students the opportunity to have professional practices and exhibition opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ed. I apologize. I also had some audio issues, but I was able to catch quite a bit. And like I said, I'm very privileged to have seen a lot of your work. I want to start off with just a comment before we take some questions from everybody, and that is the centrality of students in both of the work we saw from Maria so far and what we just saw with Ed. Your professional work and your teaching practice and your everything just sort of coalesces together to provide these incredible experiences for our students, and being able to see that, being able to see the students in that element and having those incredible experiences was really wonderful. So thank you for sharing that. So does anyone want to start your video and have a question? And let's see. And I've lost Ed. Is he re-signing in?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry. My internet's a little off as well.
Yeah. Or perhaps we can all, I know, it's the world we live in. So we can, perhaps, should we collect them all and ask them at the end, perhaps? I think it might be a good way to go. Okay, so let me keep moving. But thank you so much. Let's give a round. Everyone needs some visual affirmation today. Yeah, so I know, exactly. It's like, if we were in the same room, you would feel the love, you would feel it. I apologize that we can't give it to you directly. Okay, so moving on, we're gonna, our next speaker, I'm just gonna go ahead and read the introduction. With the goal of advancing the certain decolonial turn, Liliana Conlisk Gallegos' live and digital production, Escuache performances generate culturally specific, collective, techno-cultural creative spaces of production that reconnect mestizo indigenous wisdom and conocimiento to their ongoing technological and scientific contributions, still currently denied through the logic of the decaying Eurocentric project of modernity. As a transfronteriza, the current limited perceptions of what research, media, and technology can be and do are like a yonke, junkyard, from which pieces are upcycled and repurposed to elevate individual and collective expression, community healing, and social justice. And so here is Liliana Conlisk Gallegos.
Thank you, Johanna, and thank you for this invitation today and everybody here who came to listen to us and share our work. So I'll begin. So, as you know, assimilation into Anglo-Western European culture has been a prerequisite for the opportunity of reaching success. And higher education upholds some flawed concepts such as student achievement gaps, like placing the responsibility on students that we are supposed to serve. Another example for it is the framing that not enough women or people of color want, keyword, to study science, technology, engineering, math, when we as institutions are the ones that have enormous institutional, pedagogical, cultural, communication design, and identity gaps. So STEM classes are taught following also an aesthetic derived from a cult of modernity's order and progress, which makes people like me, for example, feel unwelcome. And this way of teaching STEM runs parallel with the purposes of deleting or invalidating the experiences of people of color. In fact, the Western Eurocentric take on science and technology has justified the fabrication of the 5 races of man and the violence of racism through pseudoscientific practices such as phrenology, criminal anthropology, eugenics, and the farce of social Darwinism to serve the idea that each race represents different evolutionary stages of humans, with whites, of course, being the most evolved or supreme. Right? And technology was also used to drive genocide and the obliteration of indigenous people. In early 20th century, under the dictatorship of Porfirio Diaz, who was actually mestizo who longed to turn Mexico into France, indigenous people, particularly the Mayo and the Yaqui, were attacked and murdered to build railroads for industrialization and the expansion of imperialistic goals. So the myth of modernity, according to Enrique Dussel, Argentinian philosopher, made diverse and multiple indigenous perspectives seem part of a failed past. So some people are indigenous, for example, and they do not even know this today. And this is due to impositions like the caste system in Mexico. And those at the top, called Christians of this caste system, it was code for white European or Spaniard, and that had financial opportunities, access to education, and they also paid less taxes. So when people had children that could pass as white or could seem like they were of a higher caste, they would seek out people from higher castes to be godparents to convince the church that the child was of a higher caste because those designations were given out in baptismal records. So people were forced to deny who they were if they wanted a dignified way of life. And the importance of cultural specificity and the complexities of white liberal arts, racism and education lies in this plot twist. One, the scientific ideas became popularized by the art lithographs and paintings that accompanied these writings. And two, according to James Poskett's research at Cambridge University, pseudoscientific ideas used to justify supremacy were supported by people like phrenologist George Kuhn and anthropologist James Cowles Pritchard, who were in fact actually anti-slavery abolitionists. And they supported and upheld this logic of inferiority to minimize the rampant fears of previously enslaved people turning against whites once liberated. So they're basically saying, see, they don't even have the capacity or the brains to do it. We should free them. That's the plot twist, right? How do we look like that today, right? So in an HSI, within a single student, we can be dealing with multiple generations of coerced assimilation into a perspective that goes directly against their own existence. Latino is an imposed and misunderstood identity. You know, we're not all the same race, yet people think to believe that it is a race. So this struggle of resistance, assimilation, imposed, you know, and then mix that with transborder thinking to think across that internal external divide, we can exist within multiple dimensions, right? And our way of understanding the world and what exists in it can be very limited by the civilization we grow up in and its current ideology. So the Eurocentric ideas of what science and technology are and can be are very limited. Through the matrix of power instituted in coloniality, they branch out into other imposed ideals too. For example, those of beauty, of what's good, what's truth, and specific to us, those imaginary and sometimes sadly laughable borders around what scholarly research and pedagogy can be or do. It is possible to understand something in our bodies without cognitively knowing how it is we understand it. Some ways of knowing have been hierarchized. For example, cognitive ways of knowing associated with human, men, white cultures, for example, are placed higher than bodily ways of knowing, which have been associated with animals, women, and non-white cultures. And these binary categories are an oversimplification of something more complex. Art is a process that allows us to experience the complexity of multiple ways of knowing, of multiple ways de conocer. STEM incorporates art to introduce more women to STEM, right? STEAM. So less attention is given really to adding culture and memory as technique. What I do is I use culture and memory as content and method design to reclaim STEM intersectionally through its own relation to marginalized knowledge and minoritized identities. And by introducing students to the art of turning the learning of experimental media production into a culturally relevant endeavor, experimenting with multiple technologies, all interacting with each other, students experience this in a different way. By proposing our version of what science and technology can be, I perform and enact rascuache resistance at multiple levels, provoking an estrangement that exposes bordered, Eurocentric, and hierarchical relationships. In collaboration with the organization I advised, the Coyote Pack student organization, I produced and curated The Art of Dreaming, which was the video we were seeing before. It was a community-centered, interactive live research production exhibition series composed of 4 linked yet separate performances exhibits. Hundreds of students and local artists were in a single room producing art made out of repurposed trash generated by CSUSB around the topic of being undocumented, with also musical and spoken word performances ongoing. The activities supporting all events were also incorporated into my experimental media courses as midterm and final assignments. And students did the public relations marketing campaigns, as well as the production of experimental short documentary videos, podcasts, news articles, and the development and creation of a multimedia webpage to house it all. And local media came and covered the events as well as the community. And the pieces produced were auctioned, and we raised over $5,000 for the CSUSB Undocumented Student Success Center Emergency Fund Scholarship in the span of the encore and the original production. Each one of those is, like I said, 4 different exhibitions. The Our San Bernardino Nuestro exhibit was another one. And those who attended would enter a room and experience VR in a series of 360 videos produced by my experimental media production students on the diversity publicly seen around campus. And in juxtaposition, we had a giant wall screening video collages produced by my decolonizing Chicano media and culture class, in which they related their personal and private experiences with the logic of coloniality and discrimination in education, in their private sector, in their private lives, then creating a dystopian and more complex version of our experiences to call for a more accurate and inclusive approach to the efforts of diversity, equity, and inclusion on our campus. What you're seeing right now behind me is the Coyolxauhqui Imperative 2020. It's a VR video where you can enter into the intergenerational Chicana, Indígena, transborder, mestiza consciousness, theoretically proposed by Gloria Anzaldúa as the genius mind of the imagination, where all those macro and micro realities that exist in constant tension coexist and interact. And the fragmentary parts of our history and our identity, some imposed by settler, colonial, and patriarchal perspectives, some by our own resistance, can be weaponized through it like powers of a shape-shifting quality with the power to be assembled and reassembled in whichever way is necessary, depending on the point in time in history and the needs. That's our technology. So the piece documents the cultural memory technique that guides my work on media arts as well, and technology experimental production, in the consciousness and unconsciousness that inhabits my Chicana transfronteriza imaginary, one that can see the past, our past is the future, and whose stance is one that exists by punching through all the violence, bullying, harassment that tries to contain it or silence it. The Coyolxauhqui Imperative 2020 is a 3D space of immersive neo-muralism, which I built with a combination of both 2D and 3D elements with 4 main components. One is the there are excerpts from ancient Mexican indigenous codices announcing the arrival of calamity. That was the invasion, rape, and destruction of these lands through colonization. 2 excerpts from the Mexican muralism of Diego Rivera, David Alfaro Siqueiros, and Jose Clemente Orozco, painted during a time when Mexicanity was being reinvented, while epistemology and education were yet controlled by Eurocentric visions of what we should or want to be. 3 excerpts of my own artwork and paintings on the effects of ideological and psychological marginalization brought by the ignorance of those who believe to be supreme and that they don't need to learn anything from people that look like me. And in these spaces, I am expected to stay silent, be professional, which is in fact code for acting, thinking, and agreeing with whiteness, and navigating in a fragmentary way where I cannot claim my right to exist equally and openly without fear. So where my power and the value of my input, which would help these institutions grow and develop further, is actually seen as a threat or uncivil, or even worse, as unimportant, which is reminiscent again of the justifications for lynching Black and brown people in the United States. Fear, they're afraid of them. Finally, there's my voice, which is carried by many voices with a piece of spoken word in Spanish, English, and Nahuatl, which is the language of the Aztec, also known as Mexica, and a musical collage composition I produced with me playing the Aztec death whistle and ocarina in collaboration with Juan Carlos Portillo, who played the teponazli, which is a type of Aztec drum, and Man in the Bottle alumna Corey McCormick, who composed the minimalist digital background sound, as well as multiple Commons licensed sound effects. So to conclude, these components are employed for the decolonial storytelling of the mythopoetic experience of the weeping woman. In the indigenous codices, she is Cihuacoatl. In the muralist, she is La Malinche and La Llorona. And in my artwork, she's La Chingada, or a woman who suffers openly and out loud, who reclaims and demands for amends to be made, who resists being fucked over recurrently, generationally, by the existence of hierarchical oppression at macro, historical, and public levels in the context of the American continent in relation to European colonialism and US imperialism, as well as neoliberalism and globalization, and the persistence of pyramid-shaped ideology at the micro, contemporary, and private levels in the context of having your perspective invalidated, made invisible, your identity be othered, your kin be murdered, incarcerated, and your health destroyed, your role being neglected, as it is well documented academically that the ill treatment of people of color in healthcare is a problem. And the power of the digital for me is the ability to open vortices of multiple dimensions that commingle with an immersive experience that can also be public as well as private at the same time, simultaneously, as our suffering is. The Coyoshauki Imperative 2020 was first exhibited in the Digital Power Activism Advocacy and the Influence of Women Online, which was curated by Kathy Ray Huffman and organized by the International Association for Computing Machinery Special Interest Group on Computer Graphics and Interactive Techniques, Digital International Arts Community. And then from that, I've been invited to give talks and screen the film through different platforms, including a panel organized by MIT, Leonardo, International Society for the Arts, Sciences, and Technology, and the Ars Electronica Festival for Art, Technology, and Society, the Canadian Center for Digital Media in partnership with the University of British Columbia, Vancouver, Simon Fraser University, British Columbia Institute of Technology, and the Emily Carr University of Art and Design. And it's also been featured in a podcast radio show called Canto Sin Fronteras at KPFK. And currently I had a project chapter proposal based on the theory and philosophy of this work accepted to Leonardo and the leading international peer-reviewed journal. We don't know when it's going to be published yet, but it's the proposal's through, and it's on the use of contemporary science and technology in the arts and music and the influence of the arts and humanities on science technology. And its effects on community, and of course, what we can learn from community, not so much what we can do for them, but what can we learn from community? And that is all. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. This was me the whole time. Oh my God, that was incredible. That's, is that a video sort of like a drive-through almost of your three-dimensional piece?
Yeah, this is okay, so I went inside the VR space and I took this video in 2D, but it's not really 2D because if you go on YouTube, I can share the link.
Oh, please,
if you
please.
have one of those little like cardboard lenses, you are inside, like you're inside a world and you can stop and look around, you know, you don't have to necessarily follow my eye, you know, the eye of the director. These are all the credits. Yeah, so it's like it's an experience really, like you experience the unconscious.
The interplay between that behind you and the experience of your words just now was incredible. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you very much for your kindness.
That's not kind of, that's statement of fact. Okay, so let's give like serious love. We're going to take questions at the end, like I said, but I would love it if you could put the link in the chat if possible.
All right,
that's
thank you so much.
Fantastic. Unfortunately, we have to move. Like, okay, so I at the beginning I said each person is more of a rock star than a rock star, and I hope you guys can see why. So moving on with more rock stars, we have. Let's see if we can stop sharing, only because now I can't stop looking at this work. I can't take my eyes off it. It was so cool. Okay, so our next speaker, Dr. Julie Taylor, is an associate professor in the Department of Communications Studies and earned her PhD from the University of Utah. She specializes in organizational communication, gender, and interdisciplinary studies. Julie Taylor conducts research that engages questions around discursive engagement and material consequences. For instance, as a community-based researcher, she examines the social issue of sex for sale through the perspectives of organizational discourse and policy communication. Additionally, as a co-founder of the Speaking Center at JHBC, she is dedicated to examining and providing interdisciplinary experiences that create lifelong learners and critically engaged students.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so this is one of the first studies that I conducted that led me into a realm of examining policy, and specifically policy as it's practiced versus policy as it's written. And I think this is a really timely piece to bring back in to examine the power differences and looking at policy implications in general. So this study, quote, "I kissed her breast and nipples and there was no place for my face to go." This is a statement made by law enforcement during litigation as a reason for why he engaged in prostitution in order to arrest a sex seller. This action is against policy and procedures as they're written, but happens often due to the hidden and illegal nature of prostitution. People engaging in sex selling are unlikely to report malfeasance due to power differentials and access to resources. Thus, this was a special case that caught my attention and begged more investigation, which led to the following study: Organizing Prostitution Through Silence Discourse, Unveiling the Masks of a Masquerade. So prostitution is a lucrative, pervasive, yet hidden organized activity. In other words, prostitution functions out of sight in order to stay profitable, but not criminalized. Important to note, this study that I did took place in a location where prostitution is considered illegal, because in some places in the United States, it is legal. Our goal then was to examine the discursive organizing of prostitution through both talk and silence. And so more specifically, we had these two following research questions that guided our study. One, what is the role of discourse in organizing prostitution? And two, what is the organizing role of silence in prostitution? The following theoretical constructs were used to guide this study. So specifically looking at discursive organizing as examining discourse is an ideal way to understand organizing activities. Discourse reflects and reproduces structures in organizing. Post-structuralism was then used in a perspective to focus on the material nature of discourses. Silence looks at the effects of both talk and silence and how silence is just as pervasive in organizational strategies. Scott in 2013 explained that hidden organizing requires a more covert perspective in exploring organizing patterns. As such, we looked at the various institutions, policies, and discourses in order to conduct this study from a hidden organizing perspective. Prostitution then becomes an example of a hidden organized system. The scope of the study is looking at people over the age of 18 involved in sex for sale, as to not confuse it with sex trafficking. The data for this were collected over months of interviews and field observations. For every discursive position that I looked at, I also did field observations. Data are presented in what's called a discursive position, and this is because we found that there were responses inconsistencies from organizational perspectives and how they both interpreted and enacted prostitution policies. In addition to this data set, I also looked at 10 policy texts. One was called a sexually oriented business license, which is sort of a cursory text, and then 113 email exchanges with participants. Some were member reflections, which I'll talk about in the data presentation. Through this process, I'm bringing in a lot of different components. All of these pieces may seem uncommon, but they're necessary to fully understand the communicative constitution of hidden organizing. So let's get into the metaphor. Organizational communication scholars utilize metaphors because they facilitate the construction of social reality by forming insights about one thing in light of another. A metaphor is explanatory. People claimed that prostitution is sort of an on the side of activity for most. Participants reference the various layers of prostitution and how people are engaging in or representing those layers. It visually embodies a dance with costumes. It conjures up notions of secrecy and adventures, which are often justifications for participating in prostitution. Interview data hinted at the beauty of masks or ability to enter and leave a ball. The more beautiful the mask or socially accepted position, the easier it is for someone to leave the ball and remain hidden. Lesser attractive masks, as defined by data, are less mobile, and they always adorn their mask, so they're not able to change like who they are, where they're at. There are two larger themes. One is defining and locating prostitution, and the second is unveiling these masks. So I want to provide a visual just so that you get a sense of Just a reminder, what does a masquerade look like? There's light, there's dark, there's fun, there's costumes, there's fluidity. There's all sorts of places where people can go and move around. So who has access to do this? Well, when I first asked my participants to define prostitution, participants typically responded with, well, that's hard. What do you mean? Participants consistently conveyed agreement with the basic definition of prostitution as the act of sex in exchange for money or goods. For example, outreach worker 5 stated, I would define prostitution as an exchange of sex for sex acts or some kind of gain, whether it be money or food or, housing or some sort of product, I guess. These definitions here's the other one, is prostitution per se is committing a sex act for a fee. A sex act is defined as oral to genital, hand to genital, or genital to genital contact for the purpose of sexual arousal and relief. But the act of prostitution occurs at a specific time and place, therefore separating the person from the act. However, these definitions highlight that everyone, whether buyer, seller, or in the initial case, law enforcement agent, should be implicated in sex for sale. Therefore, everyone involved becomes ball goers and must negotiate their masks. In addition, perceptions of prostitution are complicated, depending upon which mask the ball goer wears, because there is a correlated assumption about their position in sex work and thus placement in the ballroom. These are the different masks that are present. I'm only going to be going over the ones that are highlighted in red because of time that we have. I also created this chart as a visual representation of how we see the more hidden features. And so you see the lighter features as ones that are more visible parts of the organization, and the darker elements are where people can escape more easily too. And so let's get started. So most commonly discussed section of prostitution is street level prostitution. This is typically discussed in connection to physical representation, drugs, and being homeless. In an exchange on an undercover operation between a media representative and a law enforcement agent, they had this conversation about physical representation. The media representative said, not pretty woman, not attractive. Most girls, especially out here, work, half of them, they're in jeans or sweats or jeans. Oh, really? They're not trying to do themselves up. Are there any cute ones? Not that I've seen. And there's several layers, if you will, of prostitution. More comments about street level prostitution. One from a street level sex worker said, I hate doing this work. I really hate it, but I'm addicted to heroin. Another outreach worker noted, yeah, it's, most of the women that I know who have worked in prostitution, what they would really say is, I'm in this circumstance, and this is the only way I know how to get out of this circumstance. So whether it's homelessness, whether it's drug addiction, that's the only option they have to perceive as being open to them. And so definitely they have different needs, but we're all meeting some basic need, right? And the last is, outreach worker 1 said, it's just part of being homeless, living on the street. So I assume all women really that are homeless are in sex work. They're involuntarily coerced or made to do sex work. And so in this sense, it's really important to understand that street level sex work is survival sex. It's about surviving. So then online sex work. These participants in prostitution masquerade include people who advertise their services online through web pages. Online sex work is changing how people make sense of sex work, as well as how police enforce and criminalize prostitution. The nature of online sex work adds to this hiddenness and to the different layers. One law enforcement worker said, but most of the business is not necessarily standing on the street corner anymore. It's moved mostly online. It's become very, sophisticated. Another said, and the nature of the work in prostitution and sex work has changed with the internet and cell phones and that. And so acknowledging the role that technology has in changing. In terms of sex buyers, his mask is exchangeable and it is made mobile through money and a position in society. So although the policy focuses a lot on sex buying, the policy as practiced through participant discourse suggests that there is more acceptance of people who participate in sex buying than sex selling. Importantly, this study also highlights the difference between policy as it's written and policy as it's put into place, specifically in what are the outcomes. So for instance, when a sex seller is arrested, they get a misdemeanor, and a sex buyer gets what's called a plea in abeyance. And this is an example of that discussion. The difference, of course, in the mind of the prosecutor is she's doing it on a regular basis. She's getting paid for it. He's probably just lonely or whatever. So the prosecutor came up with, oh dear, a John's class. And so this John's class is offered every week as a way of taking that misdemeanor off the record. So in terms of male sex sellers, male prostitution is discursively constructed as heterosexual procuring of sex. So there's two levels of distinction for male sex sellers. The first is male lewdness. The example, I had plenty of experiences where, you'd walk into the men's bathroom and it was obvious that the men were in there in the bathroom. They were more not, use the bathroom. Yeah, that's just male lewdness. And you go into the bathroom and they wander off into a stall and engage in oral sex. And then the other was a conversation around the fact that women just don't have to pay for sex. And the comment is women rarely pay for it with men. And so again, making women, female sex sellers, the face of prostitution. And the last that I'm going to talk about are sex brokers. So these narratives construct sex brokers as powerful due to the control over women and connection to money. As a result, sex brokers are afforded invisibility. They participate in the periphery of the ball and come and go as they please. So for instance, a media representative once said, and then you have the pimps. And if you listen to women that I talk to and they say pimps are just redundant, irrelevant, they provide no service, they're just parasites and they feed off of them and use violence to control them. So then the purpose again of this study was to analyze discursive organizing of prostitution. The metaphor of the masquerade helps to explain the interconnected yet hidden elements of prostitution. So what are the implications of using such metaphor? Importantly, participants in the different discursive positions did not necessarily see themselves as connected to prostitution, which really helps to demonstrate the hidden organizing through layers of the prostitution of the masquerade ball. So first, we have the ambient noise of music, which facilitates this ongoing dance between participants. Regulatory texts, such as policies, serve as the music setting the tone and the pace for the interactions. Law enforcement serves as guardians of space and rooms. We also see multiple rooms present. Some are more hidden than others. The more beautiful the mask, the more able people are to blend and be mobile. Intersections such as gender and sex, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, all account for access to different agency of mobility and being able to move in and out. Street level is really the main ballroom. It's the most visible and the most problematic and easily identified with prostitution. And that has further implications. Technology adds a new type of room. Sex buyers are more mobile due to money. Male sex sellers are invisible. Female sex sellers are the face of prostitution due to heteronormative assumptions of sex. And then sex brokers are invisible security guards. And the last implication is that this study contributes to theoretical understandings of the roles of silence and discourse in hidden organizing. First, silence is reconceptualized as silence accounts for the systematic discursive moments that are pervasive and operating at multiple levels in hidden organizing structures. For instance, systematic silences afford sex buyers autonomy through their invisibility. This study illuminated how discourse and silence work together in the unique situation of hidden organizing of prostitution. Scholars across disciplines can build on findings from this study to better understand nuances of hidden organizing in the interplay of discourse and silence in the construction of organized activity across social domains. Thank you.
I'm clapping. I don't know if you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Taylor. That was incredible. And again, I have to just reflect on why do we have different departments? All of us are so interdisciplinary. And so I just want to work with everyone I see here. This is so incredible. The metaphor of a mask, obviously as a mask performer, I'm going to take in a very interesting way. So I'm aghast. That was absolutely incredible. So unfortunately, we're going to move to our last, not unfortunately, we're going to move to our last presentation, and then we'll have all of the questions at once. I'm filled with them myself. So let's get started with Dany. Let's hopefully not mess up your last name. Dany Doueiri. Dany,
oh,
did I get it right?
I don't even know how to pronounce it, so that's okay.
I usually ask in advance, and I've known you for so long that I thought I could figure it out, but I'm like, no.
It's better than I do. Thank you.
Dany Doueiri.
Yes,
I get it?
absolutely. That's perfect.
Okay, thanks. Okay, thank you. Joined CSUSB in 2000 as a part-time lecturer in the Department of World Languages. He coordinated the newly formed Arabic program from 2001 until 2016, growing it to become the largest such program in the Western United States and one of the most rigorous in the nation. He attributes this growth to three aspects. Number one, working as a team with visionary leadership. Number two, building strategic partnerships with the community. And number three, tapping into one of the most important elements that cause programs to grow, funding. During this presentation, he will focus on the challenges and rewards of securing funds for CSUSB and externally that led to more than $13 million in grants.
Thank you, everyone. Let me see if I can share my screen. Can you see a little bit my screen? Let me see if I can do it from the beginning. Here we go. Slideshows from beginning. Can you see my my screen? This is what's behind it. Think big or think. All right. So first of all, I'm not gonna go at the end anymore. No, I'm just joking. But I'm so fascinated, and I just wanna, congratulate really and then hug all of my colleagues who did amazing presentations and very inspiring. Each one of them just takes you in a world of so much ideas. And I'm just gonna put the timer so I can be respectful to everybody's time. When Dean Chuang asked me to present, I thought, I can talk a little bit about myself, but I don't think, oh shoot. I don't think it's about myself. It is about what our campus is. I'm so sorry. I just clicked something and it turned off all my connections. Just one second. Sure. Okay, can you still see me by any chance?
Yes.
Okay, so sorry. Sorry, I clicked my connections to the attached cameras and the high-tech screens that we all have to deal with. So when the dean told me, I'm so sorry. Let me just do one more thing. Sorry about that. Here we go. When the dean asked me to speak, I thought, you may be interested in what I have to do, but what do we have to offer as a community of learners? And probably one of the most important things that I feel was a part of what I did. I started as a part-timer. I ended up as a full-time professor. So a lot of the work led to this, but I really care about what is the contribution to all of us. So at the beginning, sometimes you set your stage, you set your agenda, what you want to do. Like many of you believe that it's not about my personal growth only, but it is about our collective growth as an institution. And if we want to think about collective growth, then we should think about what matters most to serve us, but to also serve our community. And therefore, I didn't want to think about the smaller grants that are offered, but what are the institutional grants that would really make a huge difference? Many of my colleagues are far better publishers, and they're publishing so many academic journals. My interest has not been there. My interest has been, what can we do to change the community? And that's why I changed to the second. I'm so sorry. I don't know why this time this happened. I wanted to change to the, okay. Can you see that person on my slide? Okay.
And with the tie, yes.
Okay, with the tie. Do you know who this person? Anybody knows who that person is? Okay, so this is Gordon Gee. Gordon Gee was the president of Ohio State University, the largest public school in the United States, with 65,000 students in a single campus. And Times Magazine, at one point in time, considered him one of the most influential university presidents in the nation. And the reason why I share with you Gordon Gee is very simple. Gordon Gee, who is the most influential university president in the United States, said that we have got to retransform our university. And we have got to put different emphasis on what our faculty do. So instead of only focusing on certain projects that count towards our professional development, we have got to think about how much we're impacting our community. And that does not come from somebody who tried to follow his legacy, but also from somebody who really did this. And today is not about me, as I told you, it's about all of us. And that's why I go to my next person is our dean. And I don't put it here because the dean invited me to do it, but Dean Chuang, as most of you know, before became a dean, she was very involved in large institutional grants. And so for some people who are more on the traditional side, who put so much emphasis on publishing one paper that you go giving a conference with 30 people who listen to you, versus things that takes you thousands of hours to write these grants and get them accepted. And then if you reject, what do you do with it? In a paper, you can do it, you get rejected, you go to another publishing paper, company or journal, you get feedback, you can always improve on it. In some of these works, in the grants, in the large institutional grants, sometimes the call is once every 4 years. You write that grant, you're dead meat for the next 4 years, and then good luck getting it again. So our dean, who has won from the National Institute of Humanities and so many other grants, understand that, and I know why she emphasized all of that and also valued it. And having said this, our institution also recognize other people. As you know from our own college, Annie Buckley has done some institutional grants in our own college, and then also reach out to the community for youth or young adults who are in the incarcerated, and says, you know what, I'm going to bring art to the jail, to those who are inmates, and then make a change in their lives. So I want first for all of us to think big, to know that our administrators, or the best administrators, do recognize the value of these grants. 3, our own college. Thank goodness we have a dean who recognizes that. And thank goodness we have other faculty, and I gave the example of Annie, who are involved in this. The next one I want to tell you is something about credit. In a research paper, you get the credit for it. You know, you do this graduate, and we just saw 5 other faculty who've done such wonderful work. They recognize everything, you know, all of those who helped them. But what's beautiful about institutional grants, which is most of what I wanted to talk about, is if we each pitch in something, collectively we ended up having a synergetic effect that the sum of our ones is more than 1 + 1 = 2. It's 1 + 1 = 3. And if we focus on these grants, hopefully we can make such a big impact on our students and our faculty and our community. Okay, so there is a warning about what I wanted to say. Just to tell you, at Cal State, I really don't know how many grants I've written, institutional grants. I'm not talking about a small KRC grant or, you know, 3,000, 5,000. We're talking about something that is a 50,000, 100,000, 400,000, $1.2 million grants. This is what I'm talking about. I honestly don't know how many grants I've written, but I think we've written about maybe 25 or 30 grants with a total income of $8 million for our campus. And when Johanna talked about the 13 or 15 million, this is because I also write grants for nonprofit organization, and that has also its own impact. So hopefully we can all work together and then do this. The problem with grant is the reward of hard work is more work. The more you do grants, the less you can check off things on your box, because it takes a lot of time to follow up. It's not a paper that you publish and you say, thank you, you've done a great job. It is not, actually. Once you get a grant, now who's going to implement it? Who's going to write the reports afterwards? So there is a lot of work that you can no longer check off. And then the relationships that you establish with grant funders, people say, well, where's your next grant? What are you doing? What are you going to do with that? Okay. So in total, maybe I've written maybe 25 grants for our campus and another maybe 30 or 40 grants outside, total of about $13 million. And I just wanted to show you, because I really want to share for all of you who may be inspired of doing such a work with all of the specialty you're doing, just to show you where the sources of grants. So you can be publicly funded or privately funded. And publicly funded grants, we go to the Office of Sponsored Programs. They help us tremendously. And you can go through federal, I put between parentheses, state, county, school districts, because on our campus, in the grants that I worked on, we only went with the federal grants. If something was state, county, or school districts on our campus, for whatever reasons, our former deans, because I haven't written grants the past few years, or somebody in the development office said, let's go through UEC, which is our foundation, basically. It's called the University Enterprise Corporations. But typically, publicly funded grants come from federal, state, county, or school district. Now, in the privately funded grants, usually we go through our foundation, and that's a lot of work also to do. Though sometimes it's a little bit less than publicly grants, and then you go through private foundations. You go through philanthropists who are willing to open individually paid checks for you. Corporations could pay you something like Stater Brothers, or county or school districts. In our case, I was able to get everything that you are seeing here in the list. Federal, foundation, philanthropist, corporate, county, and state, we have been able to get it. The reason why I say we instead of myself, I got the credit for it, but it was always, from the beginning to the end, a teamwork. Unless we recognize that this is a teamwork to make it successful, we're no longer going anywhere. And as long as we do start being humble about it and say, well, it was not about me, it's about all of us, then I think we are doing a disservice. I know I have 3 more minutes, so I'm going to try to be respectful. I have 2 more slides only for you. Just to tell you some example of what our grants have done. Okay, so most of the grants that I've done were a part of 3, focusing on 3 beneficiaries. One is the students. So in our students, we were able to benefit about 800 students, roughly between 80 to 120 students per year, roughly. So over a 10-year period, there were about 800 students. These students who were able to accelerate their studies were able, let's say, if they were transfer students into the Arabic program, they graduated in 1.3 years. Usually on our campus, if you transfer students, you are between, I don't know, you are usually between 2 years and then 4 years. I'm sorry about that. Sorry about that. Why is this doing this? I don't know why. I'm so sorry. Okay, here we go. I'm sorry. So, so students benefited a lot. If there were new students who came to this program, whether they were high school students or they graduated on our campus in 3.3 years. There is significant, this is, exceeding the expectation of our graduation initiative, which is by 2025, we want them to graduate in 4 to 5 years or whatever it is going to be for newcomers. It has allowed our students to go and study abroad. They were allowed to get graduate school, be very competitive. So that's one thing. The second the beneficiary were teachers, trainers. A lot of my grants outside our campus dealt with training teachers. In total, so far, these grants have been able to train about 1,200 teachers. But each teacher every year has about 100 to 150 students. So the impact of training teachers has had an impact of maybe over 40 to 60,000 teachers, 60,000 students who benefited from 1,200 teachers who have worked on it. Now, institutionally, and the third part, of the beneficiaries is the public. We've developed ebooks, apps, websites, and this has made it to like the Apple Store to be one of the top 5 educational apps or so on. So there's a lot of impact that you can do once you focus on these big major grants. On our campus made about $800,000 in institutional indirect costs. A lot of our salaries were offset by the grants, so the college made our campus made a lot of money on it. We supported local businesses, we supported employments for many things. Anyways, what I'm gonna finish is one thing, and it says the highest reward for a person's toil is not what they get for it, but what they become by it. It is not really about us becoming professors or associate or getting tenure or not. It is how it transforms us individually, hopefully to make a difference, for the local, for our institutions and our community. That's what I wanted to share with you today.
Sorry, I got it. So I was just going to say, this is Dany. I've known you to be such a wonderful person for so long, and to use your given time to help others is very Dany. Okay, so like now I'm inspired. Now I want to go write grants. I want to work with everyone. I'm so proud of this, of who we have teaching here. Our students are so lucky. So I just wanted to end with that and open up. Yes, Dany is the best. So so if we want to have. Let me switch to gallery view so I can see everyone. I know there's questions, but I'm just going to focus this by saying one thing that I think all these presentations have in common that I just want to comment on is you put, like I said, the students are at the center of your practice. Everything that you've been doing is for the benefit of our students, and it's transformative. It's amazing, and like I said, it makes me so proud to be here. So if anybody would like to raise your hand and ask a question, I'm just very moved right now how awesome you are. If you're like my students, sometimes they like to write it in the chat.
Okay, maybe I'll go first then.
Okay.
Well, I am totally in awe with all of my faculties, right? I mean, today's all those presenters, their presentation just totally amazing. I'm sort of like speechless in terms of their greatness in the things they do, right? And I think each one of them, what they're doing is very, very impactful and very groundbreaking. And so maybe I would just want to ask the remaining 4 presenters, you all have those fantastic projects, right? And that really kind of establish your own professional career. And then also, as demonstrated today, all the work that you did is very impactful, not to your own professional development, also to the student and the community as well too, right? And so maybe I would like to hear from each one of you, how did you even come up with this idea? Did you have the, epiphany, or one day you just tell yourself you want to write grants, and being bothered with all those, those minute details of running the grant? As I wrote a comment, getting a grant is one thing, dream big is one thing, to implement it, that's a totally different story. That's really, really hard, right? Or like thinking about the, incorporating your idea to fight against hegemonic practice and Eurocentric practice, and then implement it into your teaching, and have that invite your student with you as your co-researcher and going on this journey with you. Again, it's very difficult to create that kind of, the AR/VR project. Or Julie, you're doing those work. I know you've been doing this since after you're a graduate student, and then you continue to publish a lot of article with that, right? And then getting the recognition and the discipline. So I just want to and then add, your work. And we have seen one of your presentation when we are showcasing a newly tenured and promoted faculty, and everybody was so amazed at your work. And now we could see not only you are doing fantastic, you are also influencing students and creating positive impact on them, right? And so I just want to hear from maybe each one of you to talk about your own personal journey. How did you even come up with this idea, and what are the challenges you face, and how did you overcome your challenges?
May I say something 1 minute? I just changed my background, you may see it. Okay, so sometimes when you see the transformation of your students, what happened to your students, it's saying, you know what, I'm not gonna change. And if I've changed my background today, because in one of my classes, I've one of these large classes. So one day I have one student, this is a photo of this year. This is only about a 1 month old picture. I had one of the most active students in my class. And she's always participating, always doing everything that you could ever say, straight A student. One day, as she was explaining an extra credit opportunity that I was doing, as she was presenting, I said, I cannot see your face. Could you show it to us? So she said, are you sure? I said, yes. So she pointed this and she said, Professor Dory, I'm in the field, I'm picking bell pepper. My class is at 9 o'clock in the morning, and she's picking bell pepper and she's participating in class. That makes you cry, for God's sake. These are amazing students. And when you see these people who are committed, a DACA student, committed to education, committed to being a straight A student, how could we let them go? When you have a student who comes, tells you, I have a heart, he's a Latino, Carlos Yanes. And Carlos said, why are you learning Arabic? He said, because when I was a kid, I had to have a heart transplant. It was an Egyptian child who donated his heart to me. And therefore, I want to give something back to the community. When these people share with you these experiences, we just have to stop and say speeches and say, I can no longer be somebody who is selfish about my own agenda. We have got to go back and then reach out to this community.
Dany, what you said resonates with me as well. Is seeing the types of sacrifices that our students have to make to be in class, to just be in class, and also to witness the cruelty that they go through from colleagues. And I will say this without any fear because it's a fact. And then also that I can relate in a way because it comes from, again, like wanting people to perform or act a certain way in which you believe they should act. You know how people have accents because they speak more than one language, and there's people who treat them like they're stupid because they can't learn English well, but they don't think that those people know 2-3 languages. You know, they're actually way above and beyond you, you know, like what you are measuring them and your way that you're measuring them. They're way above and beyond what you perceive to be superior. I saw this a lot with my students, with myself and colleagues like me, right? Who are different and do things differently. It's not that our methods and the way that we do research is not correct. Is that people have a hard time understanding, but get this is a twist here. The twist is, even after you explain it to them, they still don't want to accept it. That is horrible right there. One thing is like, you don't know something, you ignore it, right? You ignore it. Someone tells you, hey, you know what, actually, this is a legacy of the way in which indigenous mestizo people survived coloniality in the Americas. And there's a reason why we do things a certain way or we react a certain way. Because like I said, not all Latinos, we're not all the same. We all have different experiences and we're diverse. So once you say that to somebody, they still like, no, they have to be like I do. The methods have to look like I look at them. And I will tell you, my work was not counted as research. My work was not counted as research this time. So I'm looking forward to when I go up for a full professor, that all this work that was not counted this time is counted for my full professor position. And I guess it could be a communication thing, right? Because you only have this much space to show something, right? It's not the same that if I share with you and physically show you the images and show you the kind of work we do, right? It is different when you do it in public, but in private, I can tell you, I have people who don't believe that my work is valid. And just like the sacrifices that it takes to create this type of work, it comes from pain. It comes from blood, sweat, and tears, you know? So I can relate to our students because I was once them, right? And then I became a professor. I'm not gonna do the same thing to them that was done to me, right? So then you have to come up with an idea that fulfills several things at the same time: community needs, student needs, your needs, right? And you're also producing knowledge. And it's kind of like, that's rascuache. That's something that people who have had to make do with what they have been doing. We didn't invent this. You know, we're just honoring it and bringing forth that format, continuing it. So yes, Dany, yeah, we have no idea. We have no idea what our students do to get the grades they get in our classroom. And all we should do is be kind, at least, and listen to them. Mm-hmm. Thank you for saying that, Dany.
I can continue if we have time left. We have some time left. Yeah, I'll be really short, but my parents immigrated to the United States in the 60s as a way to find a better life for themselves and for their children. My mom had basically an elementary school education. My dad worked really hard to get a GED and struggled with discrimination, inequality, financial hardships, all so that their children can have a better life. And so I'm here because of really amazing, positive, and impactful people supporting me as an individual, as a person, as an artist. And so what I try to do is I try to give others or students or artists opportunities that I would want for myself, because I'm here because of super amazing people that helped me along the way. So I feel like obligated to give back to the next generation, to realize that we're all in this together, and to really maybe put some more positivity in the world instead of negativity. And success for me is seeing other people succeed. So that's how I kind of structure the projects that I do, is how can we bring people together and how can we add more positivity into the world.
Excellent. Are we, I think we are well met, if I can use my theater skills here. And I am so thankful for everyone who shared their work with us today. That is a gift. It's a gift to all of us. And I, for one, am taking quite a bit away on this. And Dany, that last picture you showed me hit my heart so hard. And I wish I could show you the student who attends my class from his van because he's on the way to his National Guard service in between classes. Like all of us are experiencing, I think, a deeper understanding of our students because we literally see their lives now. We literally have a window into their homes, into who, and it's, this is powerful, and I think we need to keep talking about it. So I'm so glad that the dean is here, too, so we can continue to connect when we feel so isolated. This has been very, very helpful to me. So thank you guys so much, and thank you all for attending. Thank you, Dean Chuang, and I really look forward to giving each one of you an actual physical hug sometime. So there you go. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Smith. You are a fantastic facilitator. Thank you so much for being our, good supporter, and thank you for reading all those faculty's file. I know it's hard being on the college evaluation committees. It takes a lot of work. So thank you so much for your time and your support. And thank you all the audience for joining our panel presentation today. I know that you probably have a very hectic schedule, and we have different competing presentations happening at the same time, during the university hours. So I'm very appreciative of your participation in our today's panel presentation. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope that you all have a great Thanksgiving holiday. Take care. Bye-bye.